Greetings, I'm Anthony, one half of the Printy Brothers. Together, Sean and I have decided to print and paint every monster in the 5e Monster Manual. Today I'm going to be looking at the differences in resin and FDM printing as I tackle today's monster, the Bugbear. I'm also going to talk about self-improvement in your paint jobs, and I'm going to talk about the Bugbear's lore.
Dude, it's like building up. That's so
It's
cool.
sick, bro.
So back in April of 2021, I got my first 3D printer, an Ender 3 V2. I was immediately in love with the process of 3D printing. The Ender series of printers require quite a bit of tinkering, so I learned quite a lot during my exploits. The first thing I ever printed was a calibration cube, but the second thing was this Bugbear model. So I've been really excited to get to this monster in our series, because, well, I've already printed and painted this model. Today I'm actually going to be resin printing this same model, and painting it over 3.5 years later from my original paint job. By the way, this model is from Lost Adventures 𝐂𝐭, I'll link it in the description below, and he is actually supportless. If you watch this series, you know how much I love supportless models. In fact, one of the most popular videos on our channel is about that very topic. This model is no exception. I love the look of this guy. He's endearing, a little bit scary, and has a great pose that doesn't feel hindered by the supportless nature. So before I get started on my paint job, let's take a look at the original. So as I said before, this was printed on my Ender 3 V2, and it was printed on a 0.4mm nozzle. And I think it still looks pretty good. Sure, a 0.2 would have looked a bit better, but on the tabletop, this looks perfectly good from a distance. In fact, I've played this character in a few one-shots. Now, for those of you who don't know what exactly FDM printing consists of, the process involves taking a roll or spool of plastic filament, most commonly PLA, and running it through a hot end, usually somewhere around 200 degrees Celsius or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This melts the plastic and extrudes it through a very small nozzle onto a build plate. The build plate and nozzle move around to form one layer of the model and slowly move upward to build continuous layers, one on top of the other. So that's an FDM printer. But what about resin? This process involves, well, obviously resin, which can be cured by UV light. So here, a build plate is lowered into a vat of resin, all the way to the bottom where a clear layer of film sits. Below that is a screen which produces UV light in the shape of each individual layer of the model. So the screen cures each layer, then the build plate moves up slightly, and it cures another layer. Resin printing also has a couple of additional steps where you have to wash the prints to get rid of any excess resin, and then you have to cure them again. So FDM print quality is broadly limited by the size of the nozzle, and resin printing is broadly limited by the resolution of the screen. Of course, there are many other factors that contribute to the quality of a print, and 3D printing technology is advancing rapidly. It just keeps getting better and better, and the user experience is easier than it's ever been. Looking at them side by side, I think it's pretty obvious that the resin model definitely looks better. Layer lines are much less visible, and I think that's generally what you're going to get with resin over FDM. Of course, with time and effort, you can refine your FDM prints to get them to look a lot better and hide those layer lines a little bit more. Even my later FDM prints look far better, even those that needed supports. And the Ender 3 is definitely an outdated machine at this point. More modern printers are going to be capable of a lot more, and there are some other things FDM has over resin as well. Resin has some pretty big safety concerns. Resin is toxic, so you're going to need a plan to deal with that going in. At the very least, you'll need a bunch of nitrile gloves, a respirator, and some kind of ventilation system. And you're still going to make mistakes. You just have to be extra careful with resin, which, in my opinion, also makes it a little less fun to use. I love using my FDM printer. I now have the Ender 3 V3 𝐂𝐸, which is a bit of a mouthful, and it's much more consistent than my Ender 3 V2 was. I've done one upgrade to mount the filament roll on the side, but that was definitely not required, and I love the textured build plate that it comes with. But it is hard to beat the quality of resin. To me, that's really its biggest and really only improvement it has over FDM. If I can get away with using my FDM printer, I'll use that. For bigger monsters and terrain, it's great, and I pretty much use it exclusively. If I could choose only one type of printer to have, I think I'd take the FDM. Sure, I'd be giving up some really nice minis, but I print so much other stuff that would be a massive hassle on the smaller build plate of my resin printer. But if you print exclusively character-sized minis, resin is probably the better choice. If you're enjoying this episode, subscribe so you can see the rest of the series. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the bugbear itself. In history, the bugbear exists in folklore as a creepy thing to scare bad children. In D&D, it first appeared in the original D&D Greyhawk supplement in 1976, and then later it appeared in the Monster Manual the next year. Bugbears are said to be rather savage creatures. In the 5e Monster Manual, it says, quote, "They bully the weak and despise being bossed around, but their love of carnage means they will fight for powerful masters if bloodshed and treasure are assured," unquote. So they kind of exist as evil humanoid monster fodder for the party to cut down without feeling too bad about it. It's not uncommon to find a bugbear at the head of a goblin tribe, as they are considered goblinoids, but we'll cover all of the different goblinoids when we get to the goblins. So not too much lore to dive into with the bugbears today. Recently, they probably are best known for a rather interesting scene in Baldur's Gate 3 involving an ogre. But let's talk about its stats. Bugbears are pretty typical in that aspect. They have multi-attack, meaning they can attack multiple times on a turn. They've got basic melee and ranged options. The most unique part of their stat block is this ability, Surprise Attack, which lets them add an additional 2d6 damage to a surprised target in the first round of combat. This is super deadly if a party is actually ambushed by them. A CR1 bugbear would be doing 2d8 plus 2d6 plus 2, and they would have advantage on the attack roll because, in theory, they would be surprised. Of course, you're not going to come into a lot of scenarios where the party is actually going to be surprised. Okay, so one other thing that made me excited for revisiting this monster is it gives me a chance to really evaluate the evolution of my painting skills. It can be easy to compare your paint jobs to those that you see online. There are so many amazing painters out there. But it's important to not be discouraged. The best metric for your painting skills is your own improvement. Instead of comparing your model to someone's online, compare it to a model you painted a while ago, and try to improve with every model. Lately, in the past few months, I've been really making a concerted effort to improve my painting, and I think I've done a pretty good job of that. So let's take a look at how I did on the bugbear. And I'm pretty happy with this model. It was a really fun experience going back to my first ever 3D printed model, reprinting it and repainting it. I think the previous model I did is still decent enough and definitely good enough to get some table time, but I am very proud of how far my painting skill has come since then. I also think it's pretty clear that the resin model does look nicer than the FDM model, but FDM printers definitely still have their merit, and if that's the only machine you have, I think you can still get some pretty good results. Much better than I have here. You just need to be prepared to really tinker and tune your machine and its slicing settings. So what do you think of these two models? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching.